also we go from what's called an anabolic state to a catabolic state. And an anabolic state is that state where we're repairing our body and replacing things, and, you know, we just have, you know, we can run all day as kids and then take a good night's sleep and get up with unlimited energy. That shifts and it goes to a catabolic state where the body goes into disarray. It starts giving out the signals that you're kind of over the hill, and the body is meant to shut itself down and start to tear itself down, kind of almost like an internal decomposition process, as it's kind of preparing you to eventually really degenerate, age, and die. And so you want to do everything you can to keep your body out of that movement into that catabolic stage. There's been lots of research done with all kinds of mice and other animals to show that you can actually take yourself out of a catabolic stage if you're already in one by proper supplementation and actually reverse the aging process and put yourself back into an anabolic repair state. And when that happens, it just feels like you've got your body back, and it's amazing what it can do. An interesting statistic, there is a famous hospital in Chicago, and they ran a study measuring the amounts of, there's a specific group of enzymes. They're called the proteolytic enzymes. You don't have to remember that name necessarily, but they're called the proteolytic enzymes, and they're the protein-eating enzymes. They're very, very important in your body. We're going to be talking more about them as we progress through the call. But they actually studied elderly folks, and they measured their proteolytic enzyme count in their saline solution, their body fluids. And they found that an elderly person only has 1/30th the amount of enzymes running their body as a normal, healthy person would have. So they only actually have 3% of their enzymes function happening. So you can imagine if this is what's making everything run your body, why we age. This is the absolute core behind everything that's happening in your body. If you look on the other side of the spectrum, there are cultures where they have diets that are, you know, they just eat raw foods. They forage all the time, and then they do these special ferments with their foods that the special fermented foods create these big stores of enzymes. And in essence, when you're taking a supplement in a capsule, those things were actually grown, those enzymes were grown on a food. They're kind of cultured, and they get a very, very, very high enzyme count. So you're kind of able to do with some of these very kind of primitive cultures, and they're not just from the past. Some of them are still present modern-day cultures, but we call them primitive just because they live in a very simple lifestyle. But this is actually where enzymes started to get a lot of notice from science, was they started to see that there were cultures where there were pockets of people that would live to be 100 or more years old. So they studied them to try and figure out what did they all have in common. And what they all had in common was diets that were very high in enzymes. And another very interesting story that I like to tell people about, and I'm sure everyone's heard of the Neanderthal man. We would think that way, way back in those days, since they didn't have the pollution we have and the chemical toxicity that we have, that those people would have had a pretty healthy body and a pretty healthy life. But archaeology tells us that that's not the case. These were what they called the cave dwellers, and they lived in a pretty cold climate. So they lived in these caves, and they kept a fire going all the time. And because they had this fire going, they ended up finding out how to cook food. So the majority of what they ate, they cooked. Now, apparently, there were, at the same time, cave lions and cave bears. And the cave lions wanted some refuge from the cold, so they would want to come into the cave and, of course, devour the man so they could take over the cave, right? So the caveman actually befriended the cave bear and domesticated him, they believe, because they see with the cave bear a great affinity between the two for different reasons, but mostly because of the way their bones are. And their bones show us that they had But the caveman actually had severe arthritis and also cancer. And they think probably things like diabetes as well. Interestingly enough, the bones of the bear were the same. The bones of the bear had severe arthritis and diabetes. They think probably they had diabetes, and they also could see cancer in the bones. So it just shows something very, very interesting right there. Some people have said, well, could it have been that they had arthritis because of the severe cold? Well, at the same time, there were the Eskimos living in a very, very cold environment, very similar. But Eskimos, and some people don't know this, but Eskimos means one who eats raw, and they predominantly eat fish fat, fish blubber, and everything's raw. And another interesting thing about their culture, and these other cultures that have these raw diets with high enzyme counts, they really show no signs of having people like medicine men, like the other cultures did that were eating cooked foods. It was as though they didn't even need to develop that kind of technology because their bodies were fine. So the Eskimos showed no signs of heart disease, no signs of degenerative diseases like the Neanderthal man in the caves that was cooking his food. By supplementing, we can give ourselves that edge to potentially extend our lifetime by a third more. So in essence, if we were looking at living to being around 90, we could be looking to living to maybe more like 100 to 120 with this kind of a situation. So by supplementing enzymes, it gives us a tremendous edge. We can start to biologically turn that clock backward, start to feel as though we are anti-aging, and our biology can sometimes feel years, sometimes as much as 1 or 2 decades younger. And we can be adding on years, if not decades, to the end of our lives with great quality and a robust type of longevity. Vitamins and minerals, they're going to stay consistent, but with enzymes, they're going to drop off. And so that's where, again, if you're taking good quality vitamins and minerals, things like some of our products like the Fruitavita, the ProVitamin Complete, you still want those great vitamins and minerals. You want those building blocks, but the enzymes have to come in and they actually have to take apart all the pieces of the puzzle so that your body can utilize them. In essence, if you have a particle or a molecule of food, it has to be broken apart in several places by enzymes so your body can use it. Otherwise, these big chunks of food get into the bloodstream and actually toxify the blood, and we'll see in a little bit how that can lead to degeneration and disease. One interesting little fact about enzymes, and this particular enzyme happens to be in our formula, but as we age, sometimes we think a little bit about how our hair can turn gray with time. And there is an enzyme that actually neutralizes, part of cellular metabolism, creates something called hydrogen peroxide. And a certain amount of that in our body is good. It helps to kind of kill things off, bacteria and things like that we don't want in our body. But then you need to go in and clear that away. And there's an enzyme called catalase that actually eats that away so you don't get too much of an excess of that in your body. And when you start to run low on catalase, the excess hydrogen peroxide begins to take the pigment out of your hair, and that's when you begin to gray. Now we're going to get kind of into the meat and potatoes of this. You understand what enzymes are, everything they do, that's what we're going to look at next. And then we're going to also start to look at what happens when you don't have enough of them. So that's what we're going to move into now that you understand what they are and how we run low on them. Enzymes, like I had said, run all kinds of functions throughout your body. The first line of action is actually to not digest your food. Most people think about enzymes and digestion. It's actually digestion, like I had mentioned, is one of the last things. Your body's really thinking that your food should provide a lot of the digestive enzymes you're going to need. What kind of things does it do? There's actually over 80,000 enzymatic systems and reactions that happen in your body. Everything from the things that cause your eye to blink, to your tongue to move, to what is the color of your hair, to making your brain function, just everything, all kinds of different things. But the way that we can supplement enzymes, we're going to look at a couple of key groups. One is the digestive enzymes, which are so valuable because if we're going to supplement with digestive enzymes, we can actually put those in at the beginning of our meal so that even if we're not eating all raw, the enzymes are there to break down these foods and let the body use them without having to make the pancreas work to make digestive enzymes when it wasn't supposed to, because that's going to start using up that bank account way too fast. Okay, most people have a pancreas that's over-enlarged. Most people's pancreas is twice as big as it should be. So we know pancreas problems can actually end up in diabetes and all kinds of other things. So we want to be good to our pancreas, and we want to keep that bank account as full of enzyme potential as we can so that can run our brains and other things. So supplementing with a mealtime enzyme is so important. It also makes sure that there's plenty of enough enzymes, because otherwise if you're just getting drops of enzymes, you may not digest your food all the way, even if the pancreas is giving you enzymes for your food. And then if that happens, if it doesn't have enough, you get food particles into your bloodstream. And the food gets into the bloodstream, unbroken up, it's not usable, and the body gets a signal that you have foreign matter in your bloodstream, and it makes the immune system work very, very, very hard to try to devour this up and get this in balance. And it can't hardly even begin to accomplish it, and then it's time for you to eat another meal and do it all over again, and our immune systems get very overtaxed and run down this way. Now, the second phase of enzymes are actually what I mentioned before, these proteolytic enzymes, and they're just absolutely fascinating. There's only about 4 to 6 basic proteolytic enzymes. We can either supplement them and eat them, or our pancreas makes them, but they actually turn into 3,000 to 7,000 other enzymes that then those enzymes run somewhere between 25 and 30,000 different enzymic reactions. And predominantly, these things go in and they cleanse your body. And they really should be released kind of at nighttime when you're fasting, because the body either cleanses itself or it digests. And if you're digesting, it can't cleanse. So as soon as you start eating again and it needs to go into digestion, the cleansing process has to stop. So that's why you always take your systemic enzymes on an empty stomach, so that you get the best value out of them, because they're not going to work well otherwise, not the way they should. What exactly do these proteolytic enzymes do? They do several major functions. They handle things like your inflammatory response. They handle things like fibrosis. They cleanse the bloodstream. And they also work as adaptogens for the immune system. So let's just look at each one of these really quickly. An adaptogen for the immune system is very interesting because we have a lot of folks right now with autoimmune illnesses, and that's when your immune system works overtime so much that it goes out of whack to the point where now it's attacking your own body. And it's an overreactive immune system. And then you have people with suppressed immune systems, people with allergies and things like that. Their immune system is worn out and tired, and it's running too low. It's a little bit like a thermostat, how you can turn the heat up and it'll self-regulate itself. That's what an adaptogen is. It doesn't matter if you're too high or too low. It'll bring you up to the middle, what's normal. And that's what enzymes do. They help to regulate your immune system to where it should be. So people that don't have enough enzymes, and one of these two issues have happened, when they start having enough enzymes again, they can start coming back to the middle. People with autoimmune illnesses find that their problems are less than usual and their attacks are further and further apart.